Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, Reinventing Yourself for Your Next Big Step. My name is Jeff Murphy, and I'm a member of the Career Programs team here in the Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is sponsored by BU Alumni Relations and is offered to our 335,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. I know many of you are joining us from some very far away places. We have alumni signed up for today from Belize, Germany, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Mexico, Nigeria, the Netherlands, Pakistan, Sweden, Taiwan, Tucson, Arizona, San Mateo, California, Boulder, Colorado, Decatur, Georgia, Kenilworth, Illinois, Knoxville, Tennessee, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Marblehead, Mansfield, Mattapan, Medford, Medway, Malden, Medfield, and more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on our Zoom online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of today's presentation, I'll ask that you please contact Zoom support directly. If you want to jot down a phone number, it's 1-888-799-9666. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website, which you can find at www.bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker is very eager to answer any questions that you may have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A box by hovering over either the top or bottom of your screen and selecting Q&A. We also may make use of the chat function, which you'll find in the same menu. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, BU College of Engineering alumna Johanna Rothman. Johanna is known as the Pragmatic Manager, and she provides frank advice for your tough problems. She helps leaders and teams see problems, resolve risks, and manage their product development. One of her books, Manage Your Job Search, provides practical and pragmatic advice and guidance for people thinking of or in the midst of looking for their next best job. Johanna, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and turn control over to you, and then the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I always really like coming onto these things. Okay, let me find the... okay, wait a minute. We had practiced this.
But I told you, it's Murphy's Law. It's technology at its
Murphy's
finest.
Law. I think the problem is that I need to, yeah, Zoom didn't like the fact that I had full screen. So now I can share.
Okay, great.
I know. This is always...
The good news is you had one of the shortest introductions that I've ever done for one of our speakers. So we've saved plenty of time there. And it looks like you got it up and running, so.
Okay, it says my screen sharing is paused. Resume share. Okay, yes. All right, I think we got it now. And you can see this, so that means everybody else can see it.
Yep, I've got actually a couple different monitors going here, and it's up and running and good to go.
Okay, good. So let me ask you, and this is where Jeff is going to open the poll. Why do you want to reinvent yourself? I find that a lot of times I needed to reinvent myself because I was bored. I wanted a new job. I didn't like where I was. Mostly I was bored. I'm going to talk about our values and our career timelines a little bit later. So I often, my thing was I was bored. I wanted something new. Sometimes it's not your choice. I've been laid off a couple of times. I've met people whose career was just gone, right? They cannot do what they wanted to do anymore. Sometimes you might be forced to retire even though you're not ready to stop working. So you might stop working in one dimension, but you want to work in another. And I would like it if you can answer the poll. Jeff has that open, and
those answers are coming in steadily here.
Okay, good.
some folks are using the chat function to weigh in as well. Just about 80% of people have voted, so let's go ahead and I'll share these results with you.
Okay.
And then let me know when you want to talk about some of the other responses.
Okay, so 60% of you are looking, it's your choice. 20% of you, it's not your choice. 10% is retirement. And then, Jeff, can you please talk about some of the others?
Sure. We got bored and have mastered my job, no longer inspired. That sounds like your choice, maybe. Trailing spouse, academic spouse, not my choice. So a relocation forced you to look for something new. CEO who's doing the same thing every day, bored in early 60s, looking for new adventure. Another person, I'm fed up with my life. Things are not working the way I'd hoped. Bored, laid off, ageism. Worked for a long time, moved abroad, trailing a spouse, need to make more money, my job no longer aligns with my passions and values, and another person weighed in, I'm still not sure what direction my field is going in and whether I'll still be relevant.
So for those of you who it's not your choice, and that's about 20% of you, roughly, I think the key to the thing to keep in mind is what Peter Senge said. People don't resist change, they resist being changed. So I always want to say, how do I move forward? What do I want to look forward to? Yes, I can acknowledge I no longer have that capability for that job or that thing. But how can I create excitement? And that's the part I'm hoping we can get to today. So let me talk a little bit about the Satir change model. A lot of you, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this. We always start off in old status quo. We have a job, we're comfortable, and even if we don't like it, we're comfortable, we know how to do it. Some kind of a foreign element comes in. Either you're forced to look for another job, or you say, I'm bored, I need to do something else, or I've been doing this for 45 years, whatever it is. We go into a place called chaos, which is uneven performance. It's not that we always go down, right? We might even go up past where our old status quo was, but we don't know exactly how to move forward until we get a transforming idea. So I have a bunch of questions in this presentation to help you at least get to some possible transforming ideas. Once you have a transforming idea, you don't just go to a new status quo right away. You do practice and integration, right? Your performance is still uneven until you figure out exactly how to go forward. And then you get to a new status quo. We do this for everything, right? This is not something new. We are always in change of some sort. Even if you think about your commute, right? The traffic changes every single day. So you go through a little bit of change every single day. So if you keep this change model in mind, that might help you realize I don't have enough ideas for a transforming idea. I haven't given it enough practice, or I'm in chaos, so how can I generate a transforming idea, right? So there are a lot of possibilities here. So I was looking for the origin of this quote, and I don't remember. I couldn't find the actual origin. The real key is the problem is not is not the problem. The problem is our reaction to the problem. So if you say, I have failed, I'm not good, and that's the foreign element, you're going to have a ton of difficulty getting to a transforming idea. But if you say, okay, I have a chance to do something new, and I'm not saying if somebody got laid off or somebody's spouse is moving, I'm not saying you don't have time to grieve this, because you should acknowledge that reality that you are losing something. But the problem is, how can we take that reaction and move forward? So that's my big deal. I happen to really like change. I don't know how many of you have been on any of my other webinars. Jeff, I think I only did the one about the job traps and tips and stuff like that. But I have changed a lot of my career over the course of my 40 plus years of working. And I really like that because for me, I get to look forward, right? I get to figure out what kind of opportunities I have, how can I make more opportunities, especially how can I experiment with what I'm doing. And I want to talk about how at least I have made my career choices. Everybody has their own personal mission. And I'm not talking about the mission of your company. I'm talking about why do you work? What is it about your life that drives you forward? Um, and I discovered mine with my career timeline. So I'm going to try and explain. Jeff, let me ask you this. If I move my mouse, can people see that?
I can on both setups I have here, so I think everybody can see it, and we've got folks. Claudia, thank you. Yes, Lauren can see it. Yep,
Okay.
we can see it.
All right, good. Thank you. So I started off my very first job as a software developer, and I was kind of happy, right? My feelings were positive, and then I discovered that they were paying the men much more than they paid the women, and my feelings went quite low. I still enjoyed the work. I got a better job for more money, and some of that stuff was challenging. And then there was a huge high point, and then my boss left, which meant it was a very low point. I had a great boss. I It's not that everything was perfect with the job. I was not perfect and things were not perfect, but I was really doing well and I was learning a lot. And then my boss said to me, um, you have a boyfriend in Florida. I was living in Boston. And he said, I'm not going to give you more interesting stuff to do because you're going to go off to Florida and get married. And I said, no, I don't think so. This is actually several years before I married my now husband, my only husband, I guess I should say. Um, so I said, I really need to get more stuff, more interesting stuff to do. He said, no, you're just going to leave me. I'm going to invest in you and you're going to leave me. And I said, fine, I'm leaving. So I got a better job for more money. That was a lot more interesting. That was an okay job. Um, I actually had some real high points with yet another job. I mean that other job was okay. I left to go to another company that was actually making money. I learned a lot. We had a couple of difficult releases, and then and I was made a director of many things. It was very interesting, and then we had we were laying off every quarter, right? The quarter by quarter layoff. I was pretty darn depressed. So I went and got another job. I stayed at that job for 2 years. It was horrible. It was the wrong job for me. I did some interesting stuff while I was there. I learned some stuff while I was there, but it was a terrible job. I stayed there for the health care, right? Our health insurance issues have not changed in the last 30 years. I left that job and got a contract job as a tester, writing automated tests, which was kind of interesting. And then they made me a manager, and it was no longer fun. I left, well, they laid me off. Um, I always think I left that job, but yes, they laid me off. I became a consultant, and I've had really a lot of fun ever since. So I'm not going to do the last 24 years as a consultant. Yes, I've had ups and downs, but if you think about what I just said to you, I said I need to be challenged, I need to learn. That's my personal mission. It does not have to be yours. I am a Spock-like creature, and you might be a much more human person. I know I always hesitate when I say this stuff, but it's true. I don't I want to do a good job by the people for the people I serve. as a manager, as a consultant, as a whatever. And notice I said, I want to do a good job. It's not all about the feelings for me. And those are kind of two dimensions of our personality. Do we start with our hearts? Do we start with our heads? I definitely start with my head. I have a little checklist that says, are you thinking about the people? Right? Some of you are shaking your heads that a person could admit to this. But this is why my personal mission is to learn, right? That's what I'm all about. Yours is going to be different. So after you create a career timeline, I have a number of questions that you might consider asking yourself. So what circumstances provide you the most satisfaction? I talked about my learning as the most satisfaction. What patterns do you tend to create for yourself? Let me go up just a second. I actually met with a guy doing this once who had the same ups and downs. It looked like not quite a sine wave, but a sawtooth. It was exactly the same repetition of his career timeline. He always left a job before it got challenging, right, in terms of what would he do next. And he ended up having the same career, the same experience for 20 years. So he did not grow in his job. That was a real problem. If you do your career timeline, how did you feel while doing it? Did it bring up emotions for you that you might, if you're like me, you might have trouble articulating? But I often feel a lot when I do a timeline. How did I react to positive and negative events inside the timeline? What happened to me? And then that's about you. Now, I also want to ask you, do you know of anyone who has not experienced a career failure? And I should probably put that in quotes, because I don't often think of career failures, but I think of as mistakes, right? That job I stayed at for 2 years, that was a mistake. And has a short-term success ever turned into a long-term failure? Right? Sometimes we do that. We make decisions that seem reasonable at the time, and then we realize, not so reasonable. And then ask yourself what kind of activities you find the most rewarding and why. So this is all about mining your past to look forward to the present. So if you understand why, right, your particular mission, then you can figure out how to build your autonomy and your mastery. So the purpose, autonomy, and mastery comes from Dan Pink. Simon Sinek's Golden Circle also starts with the why. So if you think about your desire for fulfilling work, instead of saying, I want, right, so I'm a software person. Instead of saying, I want to be a software person, I say, I want to learn something, right? Those are my values as opposed to a direct job. And then once you understand your why, you can say, how are the ways I might achieve that? And then what do I want to do? That opens possibilities for you in a way you might not have thought about before. Now, the interesting thing is that we all have expectations of ourselves. And I don't know about you, but I am sure that your expectation of yourself actually creates kind of the box for your expectations, right? Our expectations absolutely shapes us. And everyone has some kind of potential. In fact, in school, people used to tell me, Johanna, you have lots of potential. Your grades don't reflect this. So we all have this potential. And when I expect more of myself, I often deliver more to myself. So that's why I'm saying start with your mindset. If you have not read Carol Dweck's book called Mindset, I strongly recommend it, because especially if you are in the position where change is done to you, it was not your choice to look for something. When I've been in that position, I start off with a fixed mindset. right? I can't do this. I don't have those talents. I don't know. I can't live up to this challenge. Oh, I don't need to bother. I get defensive with feedback. Um, I can blame other people. That's the fixed mindset. Instead, I have to work to the growth mindset. And those 80% of you, or whatever it is, who had said, this is my choice, this is what I'm looking for, that's where you're using the growth mindset. And that's where you might say, I might have to build some new skills. And that's okay, right? You can improve. Now, let me talk a little bit about this, the difference between skills and our personal attributes. I am 5 feet tall on an extremely good day. I have had a goal my entire life to be over 5 feet tall. It is not going to happen. I am a woman of a certain age, right? You can tell with the gray hair. I am never going to be over 5 feet tall. In fact, I have to really work to not lose any more height. So that's not that's a characteristic of me I cannot change. On the other hand, I've learned how to write. I've learned how to manage. I've learned how to manage projects. I've learned how to use my influence. These are all skills, right? My leadership skills, my management skills, my writing skills, all of these are skills. And I have worked to build these skills. And that's where, notice I said work, so that effort is essential to mastery. And I have learned from a lot of feedback. I didn't always get this right the first time. I am still working on finding inspiration in other people's success. Sometimes I still get threatened, right? And then I realize life is not a zero-sum game. There is room for all of us to excel. So I still have to work on myself for that. But every one of us can use the growth mindset. And if you're looking for your next big thing, that the growth mindset is really essential. There's a couple of other things about your mindset. Part of it is your focus. I have met many people who are looking for jobs who are, instead of having the structure of a day at the office, are now at home. You can see this is my office in my house. Maybe you didn't know it was in my house. It's in my house. And I actually come into my office and close the door. You can't see the door over there. And that allows me to focus on the work I have in my office. I don't do the laundry. I don't make dinner. In fact, my husband makes dinner these days. Even though I am home all day, I'm not home all day. I'm in my office all day, right? That's the difference. So I suspect many of you cannot create a space in your house for your office, as I have, but you can say, this is my job search time. I will focus from 9 to noon, or if you're like me, from 9 to 1. I actually take breaks and all that stuff in the middle of the day so I can stay healthy and active. But I think it's really important to say, how can you focus yourself so that you are able to do the work you need to do to move through your change model, to use your growth mindset, all this stuff. And then you can use your expectations to shape your new reality, right? So this is partially, if I say to myself in a job search, I'm going to do, I'm going to email several people this morning. I'm going to set up the meetups and the meetings I want to go to this month. I'm going to do all of that this particular morning, and I'm going to focus on that. So that's where focusing on the possible allows you to actually make progress. So a lot of this comes down to mindset, that we confuse our roles or titles with our identities. A number of years ago, when I first released the very first hiring book, I did a talk somewhere, and somebody said to me, I'm a COBOL programmer. I said, okay. I mean, this was in the 90s, right? So COBOL was not a very big deal anymore. And I said, "Don't you mean you're a software developer?" And she said, "No, I'm a COBOL programmer." That's confusing the title you have, the particular role, with your identity. She only identified with that particular role. Instead of saying, there's a whole big set of possibilities for software development. How can I succeed there? And that's often because we think we can't do that, right? I can't do that. Who am I to do this thing? And I was looking for a a picture of Eeyore, and I couldn't find one. But if you're familiar with Eeyore, that's the guy who always says in the children's book, "Oh, you would think I would remember this stuff. I can't do that."
Winnie the Pooh.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you must have smaller children.
See,
My
I'm
children are
contributing expertise to this presentation as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So we all just Eeyore comes out of the back of our head and says, "Uh, you would have to be crazy to do that." Right. So it's all about how can we prevent Eeyore from taking over. Um, Jeff, I see that we have a question. Can you please read it?
Yeah, sure. Great question came in. You've recommended Carol Dweck's mindset book and mentioned you've learned how to manage people as one of the areas in which you've grown. At this point, can you recommend any books that you've found helpful about how to manage people for folks that need to grow in that area?
Sure. One of mine is Behind Closed Doors, Secrets of Great Management. And to whomever asked that, if you want me to recommend you a ton more books, I am happy to do so, and send me an email, because that's a very rich thing. I'm working on some more management books now.
Johanna, I can't remember. Do you have an email address to share at the end of your presentation?
I think I had it before, but it's JR at,
okay.
Yeah, but that's okay. JR at jrothman.com. And if I remember, I will put it in the chat a little bit later. Okay. Or just go to my website and find it. Okay. So I often find that courage is a big piece of this. And I'm not talking about the kind of blind courage where we go do something, and even if it frightens you. I'm talking about the kind of courage where you say, I realize that this is an issue. How can I manage the risks? How can I use my pluck or my grit? How can I use my perseverance, even though if I don't know, I can succeed? And there's this other very interesting mnemonic called fear, all in capitals, FEAR. Fear expressed as reality. So if you say to yourself, oh, if I actually go into this interview and I'm not totally up on all of this particular uh, um, all this particular technology, and they ask me this technology, you will actually get into the place where they will ask you about that technology. And if you've only succumbed to fear, if you only say, oh, I don't know what to do about this, instead of saying, you know, I'm not familiar with this technology, but it's very similar to that thing that I am familiar with. And I can learn very fast. Right? So you take the previous experience you have and you say, how can I use my courage? How can I move forward anyway, managing the risks? And I always like to think of ways that I can say, how can I relate this thing, this new thing, to past experiences where I did succeed? Now, I'm not sure how many of you are actually fighter pilots. I am not a fighter pilot. I've never even met a fighter pilot. But John Boyd has this very interesting problem-solving loop. And he says you need to to see your reality, to find your observations. Circumstances unfold. You get outside information. You're interacting with your environment. You have some implicit guidance and control. So you got to see what's going on. That feeds forward into this orient box, which might be a little hard to see, where you say, what are the traditions? What is my past experience? How do I analyze it? How do I take new information? All that stuff. That feeds forward into this hypothesis, this decision, and then I can act. Now, you'll notice that there's a lot more feedback loops here that I didn't talk about. And what I find really interesting about Boyd's OODA, observe, orient, decide, act loop, is that it has feedback loops everywhere. And fighter pilots actually do this in seconds or milliseconds or nanoseconds. I think we're all very happy I don't fly planes for a living. I have a much simpler loop, which is see your reality, that's the observe, generate options, and you might have to ask yourself questions about how to generate options. Take a small step and then measure and get some feedback. I find that since I'm not a fighter pilot, this is the loop that works best for me. If you want to use Boyd's OODA, go for it. But I think it's really important to say, how can we solve problems? How can we have a hypothesis, take some kind of an action as a test, and then measure and get some results, right? So this way, you're not being blind for your courage. You're actually saying, how can I use my past experience to go forward? So I really like some of these questions to help you generate some possible options. What do you want your days to look like? And I really mean, think of what a day, a week, a month, a year look like for you. So when I started my consulting business, my children were 6 and 2, and I wanted to work full time. I didn't want to work part time. I also did not want to travel a lot. I wanted to travel some because I'm, like I said, this heart thing, it's not always natural to me. And being away, any of you with small children, it's lovely to be away from them for a couple of nights, get a good night's sleep, not have to worry about managing all their stuff that's going on. Yeah. So some of you are thinking I'm a horrible mother, but they're okay. They turned out okay. So I really wanted to think, what did I want to have happen? Because I know many consultants who are gone on Sunday night, don't come home until Friday night. That's not the word, that's not the kind of work I wanted. I wanted to go away a little, but not a lot. And then, so I really said, okay, so if I travel once a quarter, maybe that's about it. Maybe I can be gone for a couple of nights during the weeks for evening meetings. That would work, right? But mostly I want to be home for the next couple of years. Because just because I've started my business doesn't mean I want to stop being a mother. I want that happy medium. Yeah, it's hard to find, but at least I understood what I wanted from my time. And then I said, what elements of joy or fun have I discovered from my past? For me, it's learning, right? For me, that's the challenge, the learning. It's actually also working in teams and working with customers. So I haven't talked about that a lot, but I'm probably a little bit different from some of the software developers you might know. I actually like working with people. So because we need people to create a product, and because I like shipping the product, that's why I like to work with people. So I knew that I wanted to create stuff and not just advise. How can I incorporate any of those good feelings into something new? This is why understanding your mission, understanding what you want your time to look like, all this stuff is really important because it helps you understand what you might generate for options. And then what's your smallest possible change as an experiment. So let me give you a story, and I'm going to take a a small sip. One of my colleagues is an event planner. The problem with event planning is unless you are actually working for um, a hotel chain or you're working for a larger event planning um, group who are acting like consultants, it can be very difficult to get a solo event planning job. Right? Those jobs are no longer really there. So she said, so I walked her through this and I said, what kinds of things do you want to do? And what she realized that she really liked was not just the event, but managing all the work to the event, project management. Now, okay, I'm big on project management, right? So maybe I had a little insight there, and I said, well, what kinds of projects can you take now that might be different from event planning that allow you to experiment? And she said, we batted around a few ideas, and she said, I wonder if I could do something for my local a local meetup, right? That they were not only having an event, but they needed someone to plan it. I said, okay, that looks a lot like what you've been doing. How can you change that to moving into something different that gives you options for your project management? And she said, I'm not altogether sure. I'm going to start there. So that's fine. She started there. She worked with your meetup, and then she realized that there were people there who were working with a church, and they needed to create a database and all this other stuff, and they were kind of random with their approach. So she said, "Would you like some help?" So she not only set up the database, she created a list of milestones. For those of you familiar with agile approaches, she created a Kanban board with columns and swim lanes for who needed to do what when. So she was able to actually help them see her project management in action aside from all of the database stuff that she did. So that was a non-paid but useful exercise. What did she like about that? Well, she liked the project management part. Did she like the database? Not so much. So that gave her that gave her entrees into other possible jobs. She's now looking and experimenting with other possibilities. So you might do something like that. I always have these kind of crazy questions. I like to ask, what would you never consider and why? And so I would never consider waitressing. First of all, I'm not sure I would learn anything. I have vertigo, which if you've been to any of my websites, I'm fairly open about. So I can barely move myself from place to place, never anything else. But there's something very interesting about waitressing, which is how do you know what people want? And I link that back to some of the work I'm doing in my career about product ownership and project management and agile. So how do you actually know what people want? How can you guide them to making a better decision? I know that this sounds kind of crazy, but if I had not thought of what I would never consider, I would not be able to make that link. And then what do you want to keep doing, but the opportunity isn't there? That's where you say, how can I take another shot at this? And is there any way to combine what you would never consider with what you want? Like I said, these are kind of crazy questions, but I find that this is a helpful way to generate more options. Now, let me continue talking about options. I strongly recommend you consider the rule of three. The rule of three says one option is a trap. This is the only way forward. It's the only thing you can do. My colleague, the COBOL programmer, was totally stuck in that one option. Two options is a dilemma. How do you choose between them? Right? So if you're an event planner and you only think about event planning for nonprofit and you only think about event planning for hotels, that doesn't give you enough options. But 3 options creates breakthrough thinking and helps you generate options 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? And if you're thinking about reinventing yourself, if you're thinking about how to use what I have, right? Our past, we want to honor our past. We want to use everything from our past, but do something different now, then creating more options is very helpful. Now, some of you are, the reason I like the rule of 3, by the way, is because I'm such a typical software person. Right, first option, oh, good, let's go with it. That's not such a good idea. So I find that when I learned about the rule of 3, I always had to have at least 3 options. That meant I had my thinking cap on. Now, some of you actually are very good at generating options. And if you get to 25 options or some large number, my large number is 12, right? So I don't need any more than 12 options before I start experimenting. It's very easy to get caught up in thinking and not doing. So I want you to think about what makes sense for you if you get past 3 options to say, how do I start experimenting and stop generating? Right? This is a little trap, because otherwise you can sit in your office or your focus time and just generate options. That would be lovely, but not necessarily useful. So I really like to think about adaptability as part of change. And I think of adaptability as changing my actions to deal with a new situation. So my questions for you, and you don't have to answer this now, is what actions did you take a year ago? And how are those different from what you're doing now? Because even if you're not looking for a new job, if you're like me and the learning and the challenge and all that stuff is really important to you, how can you start adapting what you're doing so that you're not getting the same year of experience every single year? I'm going to take a break to drink something. Jeff, I see that we have a question.
Yeah, a great question from Paula. And Johanna, in some ways, I think this could lead into like a second webinar for you. Summarizing a bit here, Paula's question is basically she's working on reinventing herself, but what about the ways that everybody else sees you? So Paula's specific question, what if you've reinvented yourself through additional certifications and education, but you have a core competency or identity that you can't seem to shake? Paula wants a business development or acquisition development position in a specific industry and has relevant experience. But she's a lawyer and feels that people are skeptical of her trying to make this move when they see that she's a lawyer. Should she leave that off her resume? What advice would you have for her?
I'm not big on leaving stuff off my resume. However, I recommend writing so that you have a body of work that shows your new interests, your new certifications, your new capabilities. And if you, maybe podcasting or recording small videos, this is about marketing yourself, not just looking for a new job. And if you can point people to writing, at least up until now, writing has always been a really good thing for me. I find that if people can see that you're serious about doing something different and you've taken the steps to create intellectual property about that, that might really help. As to where to place the writing, if I knew the one right answer to that, I would give it to you. I like placing it on your own site, or on an About Me page, LinkedIn, Medium, right? It's places where people can find you, and you can link to those places so that when you want this kind of a new role, people can see you've been active in that role. Okay. So I'm going to continue. Um, Resilience is also a part of change. And, you know, it just makes me crazy when people say, oh, just get over it. So everyone goes through the change model at their own pace. And what I find is that as I'm looking for something new, what am I going to do next? I kind of circle between chaos and a transforming idea and practice and integration. And if I can maintain a reasonable emotional state, am ready for the next thing. And if I cannot maintain a reasonable emotional state, I don't drink, right? I don't recommend drinking or drugs or cigarettes. Rock and roll might be something. Um, but I think it's really important to say, how do I ground myself? How do I center myself so I can find my um, reasonable emotional state so I can be resilient? People don't bounce back. They bounce, but they might not bounce back. So think about how can you center yourself? What do you need to do? I actually do a lot of walking and I do a lot of writing. So, with vertigo, my options for physical activity are a little limited, but I find that walking is really good, and I get to think on my walks as opposed to talk. So I find that really quite helpful. Now let me take a little side note into how we think careers should proceed. So for software people, and I suspect most of you in knowledge work, we start off as technical people, right? We have individual contributor responsibilities. We take on more of that. We might take on technical leadership. We might become a manager or become an architect, become a mid-level manager, become a fellow, become a senior manager. And doesn't this look nice and even? And we can kind of predict it's 3 years here and 2 years there and some number of years there. And for anybody in project management, my little side note was, does this look like waterfall to you? And the key is life is messy. It's not just careers that are messy, it's life. So we need to expect that we take on some kind of technical responsibility. We might take on more technical responsibility, and then we might decide to do something different, and we might do any of this. We might kind of reflect and continue through this area, and especially if you want to stay technical, if you're not like me and you said software is for me, none of this management nonsense. I'm going to stay a software person. I know I'm using software, but that's okay. And then um, we might take on technical leadership or project management and then give it up. We might take on a managerial role and then become a mid-level manager. And sometimes we give it up and go back to technical leadership, and then we're supposed to retire. That's not what I see. What I actually see is that we might choose something new, even late in our careers. So, the great thing about being alive right now is that we have so many choices. And I'm part of the baby boomer generation. If we all retire, all the rest of you are not going to be able to pay into Social Security. So, we need to keep working. Now, I actually think that there's another loop that says we might go to retirement and then choose something new and then do some of this again. And whether it's for volunteering, whether it's for money, I actually think if you're going to work, you should get paid. My opinion might not resonate with each of you. So think about how lovely this picture looks. I actually really like the way this looks. I don't even want to think about being stuck in a serial approach to my career. And I think that that's part of the growth mindset. That if you say, yeah, life is messy, let's enjoy it. That might be a part of how you have to think about it. So I would like you to consider How can you lead your own changes using elements of joy or fun? How can you incorporate any of those good feelings into something new? And what is your smallest possible change that you can run as an experiment? How small can you make it and still run it? So, as far as I'm concerned, for reinventing yourself, got to know your why. What drives you? I've talked about learning and challenge and delivering products for me. That does not resonate for probably most of you. And think about what makes sense for you. And this is the nice thing about having all these wonderful possibilities. We are all different. We can all do something different. And then how can you see your reality and then generate some options so you can take some small steps and experiment to get feedback. And maybe invite some other people to change with you. This is yet another possibility. So these are all the references and resources. And I know that we have another question, Jeff. So what is the other question?
Sure. Interesting question from Jay that I think gets back to a little bit about what you were saying about sort of demonstrating your expertise, putting yourself out there on social media, that kind of thing. But so Jay just got his master's degree from BU, and it hasn't been seen as something valuable by his current employer and even some other prospective employers. So, for somebody who's just finished a graduate degree, do you have any advice about sort of, again, changing things up and putting yourself out there?
So one thing I really like to do is talk in the resume, and certainly on your LinkedIn profile, is to say the value of every single line on your resume. So if people are not saying this is valuable, I would say, how can I show the value? Can I show it in, I'm thinking about for-profit organizations. So I always think about how can I show people how this will add to their revenue, right? How can my work via this degree add to the revenue? That's the top line. How can it help reduce experiments? That's the bottom line. I should say expenses. How can I show how we move through the flow of work in the organization? All of those things. I don't know what kind of a degree it was. Jeff, did he say what kind of degree it was?
He did mention so it's a Master's of Science in CIS.
Computer Information Science?
Yeah, mentioned he's got 8 years of IT experience.
Okay, so I would actually, I might have to revamp the resume then and say, using my architectural skills from this master's, you probably didn't go to school the way I did. One course a semester for many years. You probably all did it at once. But I'm sure you had, and computer networks. Okay. Then you might talk about the difference, and sorry for the rest of you who are not software people. You might talk about the difference in architectures, right? So computer network architectures are actually really interesting to anyone involved in security and performance and scaling. So take all the stuff you learned from your degree and say how you can either have applied it to your capstone project, because I suspect you did a project, or how you could apply it. Part of this is understanding how to present yourself to prospective employers and possibly to your current employer, because they see you as the person you were. So the person who said that she was a lawyer and wants to do other stuff, it's the same kind of a problem, not exactly the same problem, because she's really changing careers. You want to take advantage of your schooling. So I think it's, how do you frame what you've done? Can you contribute to open source? Can you do some writing about how this changes something? Can you maybe create a community of practice inside your organization to talk about some of this computer networking stuff? right. Think about how can I show my initiative for my work and my degree at my current employer, and that might give you something to use for future employers. Try that.
You want to keep going with questions?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
sure. Question from Jacob. You mentioned, yeah, so invite others to change with you, your last bullet point. He's wondering if you're aware of any focus groups or other kinds of groups out there for people who are looking to reinvent themselves, other sort of support resources.
I don't know. I don't think that the career, the places that help you change jobs are actually into reinvention. Um, I've been thinking of starting up a Slack group or something with one of my online workshops. I'm thinking of putting manager job search as an online workshop and creating a Slack group from it. So I'm not sure if you offer me, if people here have suggestions for me about that, I would like that. I'm never quite sure if that's a useful thing or not. I don't know of any right now. Is the quick and dirty answer.
Another question from Ermolanda. Piggybacking on Paul's question, I changed careers and obtained a master's in PR. When friends read my resume, they say it reads more nonprofit. I have found it very hard to transition into the PR and event planning industry based on observation and research. Some industries tend to offer more opportunities to millennials. How can I combat ageism or diversity and show that I'm ready for a corporate experience?
Okay, this is about your the loose connections. So, Jeff, is there a link to my previous webinar that you can share? Is it online somewhere?
It's available on our website. If you just go to bu.edu/alumni/webinars, that actually link, you'll have to search a little bit for it, Johanna, but it's definitely in there.
Okay, I talked about a target list. So, especially if you have a lot of experience in some gray hair, I am not suggesting you dye your hair. I think gray is proud. On the other hand, you need to figure out what is your target list of companies. How can you find people at those companies to talk to? You probably need a loose connection, and it might be something like um, your colleagues' children have an entree into that organization. So um, use the power of a loose connection. Don't be afraid to network with 20 somethings and 30 somethings. You didn't say how old you were, but I think it's really important to say, what is my target list of companies? How can I find people there? And then talk to them, ask for informational interviews, maybe get somebody else to read your resume who actually is a professional resume person or a career coach. So I think that that's really helpful.
And Johanna, we're running up right against the hour here. We do have some questions that came in from folks that I think are just looking for some really personal advice. What's the best way for people to follow up with you? Visiting your website that you've got the link to right there.
Yeah, actually, let me put in there. I just put my email in the chat. So it's jr@jrothman.com. You can go to my website. I stopped writing on the Hiring Technical People blog, but there's an Agile job search tag at the bottom of my pages, so you can take a look at that. I think it's really important to say, what can I do and who do I need to do it with?
Johanna, thank you so much for your presentation today. Yeah, I like that you took something. I can only speak for myself, but I think the idea of reinventing yourself is pretty overwhelming. And what you've given everybody is sort of a framework on how you can break that down into smaller pieces. And so for your presentation today, your presentation that you've already done that lives on in our on-demand library, thank you so much for all that you've done for BU.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
I want to thank all of our guests for participating today, all of your great comments in the chat and questions that you asked. We've got another great webinar coming up on November 14th. We've got a wonderful BU alumna named Amber Nelson, who's going to be offering a presentation called The Language of Leadership, Using Your Words to Lead in Your Career. And you can sign up for that webinar and all of our other events now on our website, again, at bu.edu/alumni. Johanna, we're being overwhelmed in the chat here with thanks from our guests. So again, thank you very much. But for anyone out there who might be interested in doing a webinar like this, just as Johanna has been doing for us, for the BU alumni community, I welcome you to contact me via email at jtmurphy@bu.edu or by contacting me through the Alumni Relations Office. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I hope you have a great day or a great evening, wherever you might be. And Johanna, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Awesome.